Hello everyone, my name is Abigail and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to the latest session of Digital Construction Online. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our sponsors, but with a very special mention of FlowForma, our sponsor of today's webinar. Today's session will look at preparing for the future of construction by adopting digital working and process automation, moderated by Ursula Cullen, Senior Digital Marketing Executive at FlowForma. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A throughout the session, so do take the opportunity to submit any questions you have in the Q&A box on your screen. I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar, and over to you now, Ursula.
Thank you so much for that, Abigail. I would like to welcome you all today, and I would also like you to welcome our speakers for today. So Paul and the rest of the team, guys, would you like to take a turn one by one to share who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name is Paul Stone and I'm a product strategist for FlowForma, which is a digital process automation platform. And we'll be talking about that, I guess, more throughout the webinar.
Thanks, Paul. And Vikas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Ursula. I'm Vikas Bansal, and I work with the AECOM Northeast region. I work as a project controls analyst and a project engineer. And I've been working on the digital practice area for the past 1 year with AECOM Northeast, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Great. Hi, Jonathan. How are you today?
Hi there, Ursula. Doing well. Thanks for asking. Hi.
Would you like to give a quick intro?
Sure thing. Jonathan Evans. I'm a VDC project manager with Turner Construction, currently working over in Altoona, Iowa. Heavy focus on just digital practice in general alongside your everyday fun of VDC coordination. So happy to be here and happy to chat with our fellow panelists.
Thanks, Jonathan. And last but not least, Sean, welcome. Would you like to give a quick intro today?
Yeah, thanks, Ursula. I'm Sean Lewis, the Digital Practice and Technology Manager at AECOM. I do a lot of different digital things. A lot involves around BIM and laser scanning, but we also look at different ways we can implement digital practices in the AECOM projects, all of them, infrastructure, construction, pretty much everything.
Great, thank you so much. I think we have a great panel today and I'm really excited for the discussion. And as Abigail mentioned to our audience, please ask the panel any questions you have throughout. We've got some really nice topics to cover today and some interesting conversations, I think, and questions to be asked. So we'll get straight in. We'll start off with topic one. And I'd like to dive into this. So the current digital climate of construction, a conversation that pops up a lot, and there has been a lot of change over the last 18 months, and with the new ways of working and increased interest in digital technologies. But what I would like to hear is, in your opinion, what way is the current digital climate of construction changing, and what new trends are we going to see? So guys, who would like to start?
Well, if I kick off, just from a FlowForma perspective, it's a vendor perspective, but what we notice is that there's an awful lot of interest at the moment. There seems to be a race on by construction companies across the world to digitize, to become more productive and so on. And I'm sure that's in part kicked off by the pandemic, but definitely construction companies are looking to implement digital tools across all their activities to basically increase their productivity, their efficiency, and ultimately their competitiveness. And it's something that is happening, as I was saying, across the world. We see it in Europe, we see it in the US. We've got lots of interest in digitizing and moving away from old kind of paper-based systems and so on. I'm sure the other panelists would agree with aspects of that from all directions, really.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I know some things that I've been seeing is data is the kind of the buzzword. Everyone is collecting data. Everyone's figuring out how to use the data. But I think that's where maybe the next step is in construction is everyone's collecting the data, but I feel like there's a bottleneck. I feel like people aren't figuring out proper ways to make decisions from that data and to highlight the data in easier digestible formats than just Excel files per se. So I think that's where kind of what we're seeing right now is how to present data and make decisions based on that data that's been collected.
Certainly, and I would jump in and say that there's definitely a move to a software for everything, right? And there's always the pressure from all sides. Who's going to be the next big thing, and what is it going to be? But to echo what Sean and Paul have said, data collection for data collection's sake only goes so far, and then eventually you just have warehouses full of that data. So how do you sort it? How do you organize it? How do you learn from it? That's certainly, again, the key that we're all kind of looking for insight into at this time.
Yeah, and just to chime into that, what John and Sean have mentioned, I think data being the key of all of what we've been doing in the industry right now, and where all of the interest is really coming in, it really stems down to the fact that how we really process that data, how our clients being able to really, extract productivity out of the way we're collecting data. I think that really is the holy grail of process automation and where the digital climate is going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so important, I guess, to make that data meaningful and extract value out of it ultimately at the end of the day. Because just like you're saying, just gathering data for data's sake gets you nowhere. You've got to actually turn that into some kind of value. So you have to understand what it means and so on. So essentially from the FlowForma perspective, what we'd be saying is, align your data with a process. So in other words, a business goal of achieving a task within the project, so that you can actually associate the data you're collecting with an actual end result that means something to the project, to the business. But at the end of the day, you have to collect the data. You have to make sure that it's meaningful, that it has, that it's valid, that it's correct, and then you got to aggregate it in some way and report on it. And it's very interesting to see the level of analytics tools that are out there right now that allow you to extract and analyze and slice and dice that data in all sorts of ways. And when you're collecting so much of it, I guess the challenge as well is to slice and dice it in a way, present it in a way that's meaningful and that's easy to consume by different people within the organization. So wherever level you're at, let's say on a construction project, you're going to get some meaningful data that's actually going to make a difference to what you're doing. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So.
And what is that data that people are collecting? Not to be vague, but everyone's favorite thing in construction, right? Change orders, right? Everyone collects information about the change orders. But what if you take a little bit more from it? You have your change order and you can adjust it by trade, you can adjust it by the dates, you can look at when, where, and the what, and then you can maybe explain the how or why. And if you organize that across your entire company, then you can see trends of what happens on certain types of jobs. Is it always the MEP person? Is it always the structural person? Whatever it may be. But that's kind of some of those data that everyone's collecting. But what do you do with it? Is the big answer right now that everyone's searching for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point on trends, by the way. Like some of our clients, they're running very large construction projects, big civil construction projects. I know Vikas would be somewhat familiar with this. And what they're doing is the construction projects, they take years, vast amounts of money and vast amounts of resources. And a key part of the requisitioning of those projects now is to say, hey, you're going to capture data. You're going to capture data on the activities, on the ways that you achieve things, and what you achieved and what timeframes, etc. And then that's part of the output of the project. So you're not just building a bridge, you're actually telling us how you did it, what challenges you faced, etc., etc., in fine detail, and then using that for the next project. So learning from the past by analyzing the data and refining it, and then building the bridge faster next time around, or faster or cheaper.
You can't solve a problem unless you know what the problem is.
Yeah.
I might just jump in. We've had a really interesting question come in, and Paul, I think we might have the perfect story for this answer. So someone is asking, are there any good references that provide strong data to support that the implementation of a digital solution in construction actually improves productivity, safety, reduces carbon emissions, etc.? So I know Morgan Construction work very closely with FlowForma, and they've done some really exciting things. So Paul, maybe you want to share a quick background and maybe you can start from where they started and where they've ended up thanks to process automation.
Oh yeah, sure. A quick case study, guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of our clients, they were managing everything on spreadsheets, and they had been doing so for a very long time. And all the data on spreadsheets, it was very difficult to maintain it. A very large quantity of data, all manually maintained on a spreadsheet. So they had a large amount of data, but it was just not, accurate, and also difficult and time-consuming to maintain it. And because of that, they weren't really able to do a lot of analytics, because the data was spread amongst multiple spreadsheets, multiple data sources. And that's one of the big challenges when you have multiple systems, whether it's spreadsheets or whether it's actual applications. The data isn't centralized, so you can't gain as much value out of the analytics at the end of the day. So what they did was they implemented processes. So they basically aligned the data with business processes, again, that aligned with business goals, and they were able to use that data and measure the achievement and timeframes and so on that it took to achieve those business goals, and which made a significant difference. So they started off with a large amount of data, but it was accurate and inaccurate, and it was spread over many different sources. They were able to actually centralize all of that and then start using that for reporting in lots of different ways. And when you think about stuff like sustainability, if you implement the business processes around measuring the implementation of sustainable solutions, then you can start to analyze the data and start to make sense of it all. But a key thing, I guess, for them was that they were able to digitize these processes that were paper-based and spreadsheet-based, and in doing so, they were capturing the data in relation to the actual achievement of their goals, and that helped them a lot when it came to analytics.
Yeah, and all in real time too. So they knew where everyone was. They knew what was going on. They had full visibility of, all of their staff. And the great thing about Morgan Construction is they started in one department. Other departments started to hear the success that was happening, and it's now trickling through the organization. So sometimes seeing is believing. We do understand that. So sometimes you have to see the results to then implement. But once you one process is all it takes, and if you can see the positives from one change, I think you get the buy-in from the stakeholders that you really need then.
Certainly. And from a GC perspective, to put it another way, what I always echo to those folks, the stakeholders that are involved in the project, but also regional folks onto national folks, is really successful digital practice. It takes current workflows to determine what works best to digitize. It doesn't try and reinvent the wheel or go for rapid adoption just for the sake of cool. One phrase that I've heard recently that I really like is cool is not a use case, right? So it's hard to justify doing something new just because it's cool, even if we really want to and it's really shiny. But to echo exactly what we have said here, I mean, working with that data is the key, not reinventing the wheel, taking existing metrics, existing goals, and tailoring a solution or tailoring a set of solutions around it that is centralized and that is achievable, but also follow-upable, new word there, but is truly the key, I would say.
Great, thanks so much for that, guys. We'll move on to our second topic. So next, I'll just change the slide there. So next, I'd like to chat a little bit about attracting millennial workers with technology. So would you say that up-to-date technology is now expected in construction? We have a lot of new hires coming in, people coming straight out of university, and what are their expectations, and what should construction organizations be thinking about now?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
absolutely.
Sean, would you like? Great.
Yeah, I think technology is expected to be inside of construction. I think construction firms that have not only what Jonathan, I first want to say follow-upable. I love the word. I think it's great. I really do. But construction technology is something that you're going to be able to recruit better people with. If you're the one out at recruiting events and you have coding up on the screen, you have laser scanners there, you're going to get more attention than other people. And another big thing that is fairly new in the universities is BIM is really starting to become more potable. I'm going to piggyback on Jonathan's bulls. It is in there. I believe there's even one college that has now a BIM degree is inside of there, which is really neat. So technology is without a question something that's going to attract better millennial workers to your firm without question.
Certainly. And to jump in a little bit there, a key thing to remember too is millennial starts at 1980. If I'm looking at the official definition for when it starts, ends at 95. So you have 40-year-old millennials that are on your job site. But as a sort of blanket statement, these folks are just more familiar with what tech can do for them because they've grown up with it closer at hand, and even more so for Gen Z and on, as we go further into building out our workforce with those younger staff, they just, if you've seen a child playing with an iPad or a phone, you know exactly what I'm talking about, just how readily they're able to pick up on these tools and know how to use these tools. So what do we do to showcase that, really? And I think Sean touched on it. Like I said, not necessarily the bright and shinies, but the bright and shinies with the use case, right? The laser scanning, the 3D coordination, utilizing virtual reality and augmented reality, all the stuff that we're actually using in our day-to-day that has that cool factor, but that also serves a very specific purpose with very measurable goals.
And just to add to what Jonathan said, I think it's also about that like firms really need millennials and people who just understand technology better. I know a lot of our discussion today is going to be more about how we implement technology where you don't need coding, but there are lots of aspects of digital construction that really need some sort of coding experience or understanding how data really works. And the differences between engineering and computer science are sort of now changing, and it's becoming more of a unionized sort of an education. And it really helps for engineering firms in construction to have young people who understand that aspect of technology as well, so that they can take forward the industry.
Yeah, like when we look at our customer base, we tend to sell into senior members of the team, so it's the C-level resources and so on, and they totally get the message that we're trying to push out in terms of process automation. But I guess process automation, it's not the coolest thing. However, what you find is that, like what I find a lot is that the people who are using our tool to automate their processes, a lot of them are actually going to be the younger members of the workforce. So it's those 20-somethings or maybe early 30-somethings who take the bull by the horns and get in there and start using the tool to digitize. And one of the things like we are a no-code tool, but nevertheless it still requires that thought process, and you still end up with a solution at the end of the day that you've built yourself. And a lot of people kind of pride themselves, and it's like they've built their baby, and they built a field change request process, for example, and they're kind of proud of that fact. But yeah, going back to the point, sorry, that very often it's those apprentices, the new recruits who come into the organization, who are most inspired by the fact that they're empowered to build out their own systems, and they take the bull by the horns, they jump at it, and they produce results really quickly. So it's really interesting to see in terms of technology, because I know that in the past, let's just say it, construction was a bit of a laggard in terms of adopting new technologies. But I think right now, at the moment, there's definitely a cool factor, Jonathan, just like you said, and definitely the new people coming into the businesses are the ones who are pushing, to adopt the technology and to produce good results with it. So yeah, I think going back to the point again, sorry, that technology definitely attracts those millennial workers, and the millennial workers kind of expect it. They're coming in and they're thinking, why isn't that there already? So definitely that's what you're seeing.
Certainly, and I would say they expect it because in their mind it's just a math problem, right? If you can have something that automates something and it reduces work hours for an individual by X per week, at that point it's like you said, it's a natural question, why are we not already doing this?
Why are we not doing it? Absolutely.
Very good point.
And talking about growing up with it, so I got a story when my daughter was in a pre-K program, so we're talking before kindergarten at her daycare school, they had them doing rudimentary coding, where it was essentially a little block robot that you would tell it what color lines to follow, but then not to go onto a different type of line, or if it was the same color, but it went to a dashed line, to follow or not follow that. So, I mean, literally, this is pre-K. They're being taught some simple types of coding. So they're absolutely growing up with it. It's crazy, but it's good.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you guys have all touched on that word coding. And there is a lot of confusion. We have no code, we have low code, and we have code. So Paul, maybe you want to kick off and maybe share with the audience what the differences are and what no code and low code, and what are the differences and what does everything mean?
What does it mean? Yeah, sure, okay. Like in terms of coding, the thing is that you have to, is a skill that you have to learn, and it takes some time to become good at it. It helps an awful lot though if you start off in kindergarten, because you know you'll learn it naturally, I guess. But the thing is that it takes time to learn, and the other thing is then it takes time to actually build solutions using coding. Um, so you just have to bear that in mind. As you move to low code, it takes less time and less learning, and then no code, it's less learning still. So I think, like from our perspective, we would be pushing no code, but people need to understand what that really means in practice. What it means in practice is that there's less skilling up time, and it takes less time to actually build a solution using a no code approach, right? The solutions at the end of the day are very similar, right? So whichever route you take, but it's just that, you know, if you're going down the coding route, you'll get a good solution, but it will take some time to actually build that solution. And the other thing is it takes a little time to fix it and modify it and so on. So it's a kind of time resource kind of thing that really matters at the end of the day. But we'll show you a little bit about that in the demonstration. I don't want to dwell on it too long and start stealing the show. I'll show you that later on, what it actually looks like.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. We'll move on to topic 3 then. So overcoming lagging productivity. So the pandemic has really highlighted the importance of organizational productivity, not only in construction, but across all verticals, I think. And digitizing can mean more than just removing paper and using Excel, or removing the use of Excel. But in your opinion, how can a digital solution improve productivity? And have you seen any real life stories yourself? So guys, maybe Sean, do you want to kick off there and start?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there that can be talked about on overcoming lagging productivity. I mean, that's what we see that all the time, where you get stuck on the random tasks. You get stuck on a massive Excel sheet trying to figure out, how does this point to this? What do I do with this sheet and this sheet and this sheet? And how to make it visual for someone else to see. So that's one of those things where I think there can be a big benefit of the automation, is maybe you have Excel sheets and you visually tell it this, or this. The other aspect that I want to see is, what if you have paper? So moving on from paper, if you have paper, if I can just take a photo of it, and then there's some AI that reads everything that's on that sheet and then automatically puts it into the Excel sheet, or puts it into something, fills all the forms out for me, instead of someone sitting there typing in something, looking at a piece of paper, typing it in, looking at a piece of paper, typing it in. I think that's a big thing that could help that lagging productivity, because no one likes doing that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as well, I'd throw in the fact that focusing in on process is a good way of, first of all, measuring your productivity, because you may not be measuring it at the moment. And there's some things that, like, the small things that make obvious differences to your personal productivity. So doing things like scanning a document into a form, for example, that's going to make a difference to you straight away, in that it takes a few minutes less to do it, etc. Right? But also then, like on a broader scale, you have processes that run in your organization, and measuring those processes and how effectively they're running is very important. And this is where the analytics is coming in. Let me just take a drink of water. because you want to actually see the effective use of the resources in your organization. So looking at the process, how long it takes, who's executing the process, and then analyzing where there might be bottlenecks occurring over time in that process. You can then start to address it by refining the process to remove the bottlenecks. It might be a resource issue. It might be a case of, the process is actually wrong, that it's got tasks in it there that are really unnecessary. And you can analyze all those activities across your organization and try and refine them. So it ultimately increases productivity significantly over time. The one thing I'd say though is that also has to be supplemented by that personal productivity as well. So just like you're saying there, Sean, about the ability to scan a document into a form, for example, you have to do stuff like that to get people to adopt the systems that will give you even bigger gains down the line by streamlining your processes. Right? And when I say streamlining your processes, I don't mean you specifically, I mean your organization's processes. So you got to start by, I always feel you got to start by giving people a carrot. You actually say, okay, well, hey, your personal productivity is going to be increased because we're going to make a system that's easier to use, right? So whatever system you're using right now is going to be 2 times, 3 times, 10 times easier, and because it's going to automatically fill things in for you, for example, right? Or it's going to be available on mobile devices, right, in your hand. So you have to give people a carrot and give them a personal benefit straight away, and then look at the bigger picture and say, well, actually, you know what? Overall, for your organization, is going to be an even more significant benefit because you're going to string all this together, connect it all together, and look at it and analyze it over time and trends, and then you can start to actually make your organizational processes more efficient. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're also getting not that big analytics boost as well, because you're collecting all that data. So sorry, I covered an awful lot of ground there, but I'm a bit passionate about processes, and I do feel that's definitely the big end result at the end of the day if you can focus in on that. But yeah, but giving people a carrot up front to kind of improve their personal productivity is definitely the right place to start.
Certainly. And oh, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I was just going to say, in my experience on the GC side of things, I love the carrot reference, right? In our case, the carrot oftentimes is to wrap it up in a few things. What it is, so what is the solution? What it replaces, so what are we currently doing, right? What the gains are, and the gains can be anything from time gains, costs, staff, just hours in the week, any number of those or all of those. But really, the thing past just those is also saying, basically being the salesperson or the champion for that solution and saying, here are some resources that the platform provides, so some manuals or some further information reading material that you can delve into on your own time, but also here are some of our in-house resources. So what are we doing to document how we are using this solution, whether that's a white paper, whether it's just a basic how-to document, presentation, whatever the case may be. What are we doing to document why we're doing what we're doing, and then get that information into your hands? That way it keeps the process sort of evergreen. And if we have new folks rolling in, or folks who need a refresher, we can just hand them a virtual packet of information and get them spun up straight away.
Yeah, I mean, just to connect what Paul and John have just said, I think one major thing that I've seen, which is an issue with productivity with processes, is just the execution of the way we do it. John, you hit the point, right, that we need to have, there has to be a champion who sort of understands the use case of any process, and if we are applying it to a certain project or maybe a portfolio of projects, doesn't matter. But as long as the team really understands how we really, use the data that we're collecting, it just becomes a point which has no use. Like you could be collecting all sorts of data, but if you're not really using that information for any other thing or to improve any other process, it just really, has no value that gets added. So I think it's really important that when we are designing processes, when we're including any automation into our existing processes, we also understand that if we're getting a product out of that, we need to be able to utilize and use it, in ways that helps, all sorts of stakeholders who are involved in the project.
Great, thanks for that, guys. We've just had a couple of questions come in, and some aren't related to this topic right now, but I might just pose this one to you if you could help. So have you noticed digital requirements increasing on projects? I've worked on projects with digital requirements as contract deliverables. Can you describe some of the challenges these digital requirements create across an entire project? Jonathan, I can see you nodding there. Do you want to take that one?
Certainly, yes. Great question. And we absolutely have noticed huge digital requirement increase, especially on larger projects or especially with repeat clients, right? And really the key driver to that, I would say, is the use cases, all of the abundant data and information that's out there that says if you do blank, whatever that blank is, you will see an improvement, you will see better construction, better installation, so on and so forth. So there is a huge client drive to become, just like, on the GC side and on the vendor side, to become the best or to become the driver, right? So in order to do so, they are codifying these requirements into documents that not only go into the GC's hands, but also go into all of the trade partners' hands. So some of the challenges that this creates, to answer that directly, is, you're always going to have trade partners that are a little bit, how shall we say, understaffed for doing VDC or BIM coordination in particular. The bridge to that is, again, being open and honest for saying this is the benefit that's being provided. This is why this is a client requirement. This is why this is now part of the spec. Providing that, like I said, that packet of information, so to speak, to get them spun up if they are new to the process. Also, what we found successful is providing resources for them that say, if you can't do it, here's someone that may be able to for you. Here's some widely available resources to get you going if you do want to learn for yourself. So again, kind of a long waterfall of words that I'm going through here, but something that, like I said, I'm passionate about and see quite a bit about, because it is a huge conversation right now. And I'm sure some of my other panelists will have a lot of good information on this as well.
Yeah, like certainly from the clients I work with, that definitely that's come up. I mean, one of the big challenges is how do you get those subcontractors to use the same systems and contribute in the same way to the overall project? And it's really difficult. It's a big challenge. Like we had to build an extension to our system that would allow people who are not involved in your organization to actually participate in processes and so on. But that's in response to a real requirement in the industry for that to happen. So it's how do you involve those subcontractors and how do you get them to contribute data and so on, so that you can meet those requirements from your ultimate customer. It's a real challenge, but there are ways of doing it. And what we're finding is that you get this trickle down effect to some extent of the larger GCs adopting technology, and then the subcontractor, in order to get work with them and get contracted, are starting to adopt those same technologies on a smaller scale. So I don't know, guys, if you've seen that, but certainly we've seen that in some of the large GCs that we work with.
Right, and I agree with you, Paul. I think digitizing becoming a requirement. I can speak for some of our clients in the Northeast, where we work with public agencies within the transportation realm, and it's becoming a requirement from something like the MTA, that most of their major projects are now sort of being required to have a BIM component. So the deliverables that they have to be in BIM, and that's the challenge that on design build procurement projects, where the contractor really leads the way. The GC is facing issues with managing that requirement with its subconsultants, and it's everyone operates in their own ways, has their own solutions. Some of our subconsultants are taking up that challenge and recruiting to make sure that they're filling up the requirements. But some vendors for GCs, they're not able to make that shift. So the GCs, as John just mentioned, they're accommodating that and finding ways that how they can work with a vendor who is not fulfilling that digital requirement, and still within the BIM realm of that GC, they're able to accommodate that that change. So I think it's critical, and I would say it's actually good that it's becoming legislation to a certain extent, because just the motivation of future productivity gain is sometimes not enough to push adoption for a certain process. You sometimes do need legislation that comes in that makes people do that change, and then people realize that, okay, this is really what everyone was talking about. So yeah.
Yeah, like I could
Yeah,
say that
and
also. Sorry, go ahead.
with the contract side, now that you're seeing all of these get put into the contract, I think it also means that it's no longer a new cool thing. The use cases have been proven, and that's why those owners want these things implemented on their jobs. And then other aspects, I think was also needed. So it's no longer a new thing, but I believe it also got accelerated through the pandemic. When people weren't able to be at job sites, when people weren't able to be at physical locations, everything had to be digital. So I think that it took everything that was already in motion and just accelerated all the digital platforms just further, because of people not physically to be able to be on job sites.
Oh, we definitely noticed that in terms of levels of interest, that the pandemic really pushed people to adopt technology, to digitize. The definitely more and more people joined. Sorry, came to us and asked us about digital technology. Once the pandemic started, about 3 months in, we started seeing a real uplift in interest, and I think that's across the board. Actually, it's not just construction, but for sure construction, because construction companies generally stayed in operation. They continued to build, certainly on civil projects. So they still had to continue working, is what I'm trying to get to there. And if they had to continue working, well, they couldn't depend on things like paper-based processes and so on. So they just had to digitize. And definitely there was an uptake in interest. And I think, the pandemic, certainly has had one effect in like increasing the level of digitization within construction.
Thanks very much, guys. I'm just going to move us on to the next topic, if that's okay. So topic 4 is about the all-in-one approach. So many struggle with wondering where to start, and when it comes to digitizing, that's probably the question that's on the top of everyone's mind. Okay, this sounds great, but where do I begin, or how do I begin? But what would you guys think are the benefits of an all-in-one approach when it comes to process automation? So I know we've talked a little bit about data and reporting and workflow and forms, but Paul, maybe you want to put it all together and talk a bit about an all-in-one approach and how that can probably save you time and speed up adoption as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick us off, I guess, on this, but I'm sure the panelists will all have a lot to talk about here. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're finding is that with the push to digitalization, people are it's almost like there's a race going on where people are racing to better each other in terms of, digital adoption. And they're running out there and buying lots and lots and lots of different systems. And you have the good thing is that, yes, you get digitized. You certainly probably improve that personal productivity. You'll have those carrots, but maybe you're losing out on the bigger picture. And let me explain what I'm saying there. So let's say you use a solution that's, so you buy a solution that's for health and safety, and it's very strong in executing on that, in a sense that it provides you with, let's say, mobile applications and so on, and central collection of data, but just for health and safety. So you end up with a very good health and safety system. You then have to go and you get a system for project controls, and you end up with a very good project control system. The thing is that you end up with lots of good systems, and maybe some bad ones thrown in there as well, but you don't get that kind of centralized, I'm going to call it a data lake, a centralized collection of data that you can use for analytics down the line. So you don't win in the longer term, but you do end up, doing a good job on health and safety. So I think what people need to consider is how do you get to that bigger view of it? How do you get to that more strategic view where you're looking at an all-in-one solution where you're actually monitoring all the activity in your business and you're collecting all that data centrally, and you're able to see a more holistic general view of your operations and start to look at trends, etc. So I think that's something that people need to be considering when they're looking to digitize. From our point of view, we try and incorporate, as much as possible in one solution. So FlowForma can be used for lots of different things. Talk more about that later. But the thing is that regardless of what you're recording, whether it's health and safety or project controls, project operations, all that data is stored in one central area. And I think that kind of central access to data as we go forward is going to become more and more important. So you're having one large collection of data that's kind of a source of information, and it's all stored accurately and then able to be analyzed, so that you can start looking at trends that you may have not even been aware of in the past. You're finding out data insights that you wouldn't have been aware of. So the all-in-one approach, I guess it's a complex thing to say, but essentially what you're trying to do is monitor all the activities in your business, regardless of what type of activity it is, and store all the data on that centrally. FlowForma, of course, supports that, and we'll talk more about that later, but that would be my contribution here to the conversation. Now, I'm sure you guys have a lot more to say about it.
I think you hit on something with the data lake. But currently, I think a lot of folks, it's really data streams. To data stream coming over from operations, data stream coming over financial, data stream coming over from XYZ. And how do you get those streams to all flow into the same lake, and how do you get them to connect together? I think that's really probably the big question that everyone's trying to figure out right now, is how do you get all the data streams to go into one data lake, and then when it's all there, what do you do with it? I think that's one of the big questions that everyone's trying to answer right now.
Absolutely.
And I don't have the answer, or I would say.
I was going to mention that the top three things that I think we're all looking at is how do we make solutions that are centralized, A, B, measurable, and C, reportable, right? Those are, I would say, the three key things that we're looking for. And I love the streams and lakes analogy. I think that's perfect. Another perspective that I wanted to throw in on top of what you, Sean, and Paul have said is that's really kind of where we come into play, and folks in the industry that are like us, right? Because even though we're in a rapidly digitizing world, people are still, I would say, the biggest resource, right? So I take it as us being in charge of making sure that we're getting information directly from those stakeholders, from those folks doing the work on what their hurdles are, how can tech help, not hinder, right? Taking all of that response and all of that information, kind of coalescing it into, here's what I have received from parties X, Y, and Z. Here's the solutions that they're looking for. Here's what's out there that can, take all these different streams from all these different parties, take the lake of information that's a result of that, and really, again, make it centralized, measurable, and reportable.
Yeah, I mean, I think all three of you touched on most of the points that we can talk about in having a unified approach. But I think one thing that I would say is, there's so many solutions that are coming up. I think, and that's the one thing about having so much excitement in the industry right now. There's so many solutions for the exact same thing that come up, and I think one thing that's really happening on a broader scale in the industry is, there's a lot of consolidation that's happening within a lot of the companies that's coming up and offering solutions of individual segments of a process. And I think as GCs and major design firms, we sort of have our work cut out, where we have to make sure we work and manage our processes in the right way. And every project has its own needs, and we sort of have to have an understanding as to how we are managing the expectations of that project. We might not need the same, and this might be contradicting each one of you, but we might not need an all-in-one approach when we are working on a solution for one particular, mega project. And I think that's sort of bespoke and a bespoke approach is also required when we're talking about just an all-in-one approach.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, if it's okay, like to add an example of one of our clients who've decided to basically adopt standardized processes across all of their projects. So this is a major civil engineering firm in the UK, and what they did was they wanted to have a set of standardized processes. And when I say processes, it's not just a process, it's the data that's collected, it's the documents that are managed during that process as well. To have a set of standard templates that they would use for every project. And what they're doing is they'll have a standard set of processes that relate to, let's say, a rail construction project. And then when they get a rail construction job in, they kind of deploy these processes to that rail construction project. But because these projects are so large civil engineering projects, that basically they say, okay, well, listen, here's the templates, but you know what? We respect the fact that your implementation, your particular project is going to be not exactly the same as the last one. And you can go and you can modify these. You can actually change those processes and adapt them to your specific ways of working on that project. And then what they get out of all of that is they get a set of processes that are pretty good right off the bat, but then are modified, tailored to that specific project. And all the data collected during the execution of those processes goes back into the same data lake as the other rail projects and as the last previous rail projects, etc. So they're gradually over time building up that big collection of data. But they have, it's kind of related to this all-in-one approach where they have this kind of standardized set of ways of working that are modified for each project slightly. So each project runs most efficiently, but then they also get that collection of the data. So it's a different take, I guess, on all-in-one, what that means, but it's trying to, what I'm talking about there is kind of standardizing the way that people work so that you're gathering all the information from all the different projects that you're executing.
Yeah, it sounds like
You hit on
customization. Sorry, Sean.
you
go
hit on
ahead.
something good, Paul, with templates and what makes data extraction easier. Having the same set of templates across the board. And then you can just set up your process and just pull that data right out if everything's standardized up front with templates and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a big difference. And I suppose we're going back to data again. If you're capturing all that data on the execution of those processes through the templates, you can then refine the templates over time and make them better. I just thought I'd add that in. So continuous improvement is a big thing. You'll see it a lot in, in manufacturing companies, that kind of thing. But what we're finding now is that that's actually being applied to construction. And I don't think it really was before. If you go back 10 years, maybe 20 years, people didn't continuously improve their processes because they didn't really understand them anyway, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, okay? But I think that people are paying more attention to it now, and they are actually looking to continuously improve to make themselves more efficient. And that's all tied into a sales cycle, by the way, because if you can claim that, hey, you're the most efficient construction company out there, you're going to get picked in those bids. So it all kind of flows back into sales. But that's really jumping off to one side. Sorry, guys.
Not at all, Paul, not at all. Someone asked a question there about data, so I hope that question was answered thoroughly enough for you. But we are a bit tight for time and we've got so much to talk about, so we won't get to answer everyone's questions, unfortunately. But I'm sure the guys will be able to answer any questions via email after if needs be, so just so the audience know that. But we'll move on to topic 5, our last topic, and that's preparing for the future. And how do we prepare for the future? So it's not a quick fix that's needed, and Paul, I think you mentioned that earlier on, but maybe we could start off by deep diving into what are the common objectives to digitization that you've seen and how can you overcome them. So I'm not sure if anyone has any stories they could share of any objectives, or people questioning things, and how do you answer those questions, and how can you be that champion in your organization to move process automation forward?
Well, I'll kick off with a story of one of our customers, who's a medium-sized construction company in the UK, as it happens, and they decided that they had to go digital. They weren't a big GC; they were a smaller company. They decided that they had to go digital to maintain their competitiveness, and they were concerned that their digital adoption was actually very poor. Most of their processes were paper-based, so they were filling in paper-based check sheets on site and so on. And they decided that they wanted to go digital. They came and had a look at FlowForma. And what we normally do, by the way, is it's going back to a point that Jonathan mentioned earlier on, which is providing the support resources for people. It's so important. So we actually have this support program whereby we handhold you in, like we talk about people building their own solutions, digitizing their own processes. It's all about self-sufficiency. You go do it yourself. You're not dependent on the IT department. But we do have this hand-holding processes, sorry, this hand-holding service that actually gets you started. And I think that's one of the hardest things when you're digitizing is to get started. So we handheld this company to start building their first process themselves, having lived in a world of paper for so long. But the leaders or champions within the company who first wanted to take this first step, they decided, nah, we're not just going to do one, we're going to do them all. And they actually spent 10 weeks building out 40 different solutions, 40 different digital processes, and because they decided, listen, it's now or never. We really need to move forward. We have to become more competitive. So we're just going to do the whole thing. And it really was very, very impressive as to what they delivered. They surprised even us. Like, we talk about, hey, you can do a lot, you can scale up, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? They knocked us over in terms of how much they did. But tying it back to the topic here, that's what they saw as preparing for the future. They just felt that they had to digitize. And I think it's common across so many construction companies. Like, all the GCs will have their digital transformation programs, in place, and they're executing on them and so on. But it's across the entire construction industry. All the smaller guys as well are feeling the pressure to digitize, and sometimes you'll have, let's say, innovative champions in those companies who decide to make the leap, to make a start. And that example of the company in the UK was one of those where they decided, listen, to maintain our competitiveness, we don't just need to make a start, we need to make a jump. And they jumped away from paper. I'm not sure I can actually name them, Ursula. I guess I can't. So we'll leave that for another webinar.
But yeah, I think that's a really great story. And Paul, so I know, we've spoken to a lot of our clients, and their objectives are always different. And obviously for that particular organization, that's the way they need to get started. And I think that's really important point, is that you need to look at your processes and your business people, and what's the best solution and the best way forward for you. And that does take a little bit of thinking and a little bit of planning and discussion. But I think once you have that goal set in stone, speaking to someone and getting the support, as you mentioned, Paul, is really important. And that probably can help some challenges that are internal too. So, we've seen that there's been questions raised, or why should we do this now, and why should we do it this way? So have you seen that, Paul? Like, there have been people asking those questions, and how do the organizations overcome the objectives from maybe stakeholders or different individuals in the organization?
Yeah, and it goes back, I think, to that point that was raised earlier on about champions. So you have to get people in the organization who are prepared to stick their hand up and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to own this. I'm going to push it forward. And we do find that a lot. We engage with all sorts of companies, and we find that the ones that succeed are the ones that have the champions, that basically have those people that can internally sell those ideas, who can internally sell ideas to people who are not used to using digital technology, to people who are basically unfamiliar with it and maybe not so comfortable with it. You have to have somebody who's able to sell it internally. So it's not just a vendor selling your product, it's a vendor selling it to you and then you selling it to your colleagues. And I think, like, from our perspective, what we see is that the way to sell it, the best way to sell it is to actually produce quick results. So if you can show that actually the solution, whatever the solution is, whether it's a BIM solution, whether it's process automation, whatever the solution is, if you can show it producing quick results. So rather than it being, let's say, just simply cool, that it actually makes a difference to people's ways of working, to people's personal productivity, the carrot, and so on. If when you can show it can make a difference and show that difference being made quickly, that really helps with that internal selling process to get the system adopted by the largest number of people in the organization. Because at the end of the day, whatever digital technology you bring into the organization, unless it's adopted, it's not delivering a return on investment. So adoption is everything. And the key to adoption is having that champion, having that internal resource to do that selling. Yep. And then different systems can be, there's a different selling job for different systems. So whether you're selling BIM, you have a BIM audience, and then if you're selling process management, you've got a process audience. In other words, what I'm saying there is that the people who use BIM and people who use process management solutions and may be the same or maybe different in the organization. You have to know your audience. And I guess it's the same with every salesman out there, whether you're selling a vacuum cleaner at a door or whatever. Like, you have to know who you're selling it to. You have to know the product you're selling, and so on. But yeah, that internal sales piece is so important. And yeah, please, sorry.
No, I was just going to echo what you were saying, Paul and Ursula, and saying really to zoom in a little bit further on that champion, right? The quick wins I think that you touched on are tremendously, tremendously key. But no matter how many quick wins you have or what the case may be, you're always going to have those folks that are resistant to change. And really what we've noticed with our champions is those individual folks will sort of take that as a challenge and, you know, confront those folks and say, okay, what does this new solution need to do for you specifically to buy in and start enjoying it, using it, taking advantage of its capabilities, whatever the case may be. And oftentimes what we've encountered is those folks that are resistant to change, really they're just looking to feel empowered, right? To make sure
Yeah.
that their voice is heard and that they're the ones that are using it every day. And we have all these people that are trying to make all these different changes and I wasn't consulted. So by having those champions, like you said, really selling and tapping into the personal side of things and saying, okay, here's what we need to do for Bob and, for Bob to buy in, right? Or here's what we need to change in order for him to go from not using it to using it every single day, whatever the case may be. That personal individual empowerment based on what the solution is has been absolutely vital.
Yeah, I could give another quick example of that in practice. So we're involved in a large highways project again in the UK, and it was a 4-year duration project with about 2,500 contractors, and they implemented a solution for permit to dig. Now, permit to dig may be something that the audience is very familiar with. It may not, depending on your area, but it was the first time this solution had been implemented in the UK. Bizarrely, I felt, but there you go. Nobody had ever successfully digitized it before, and they used FlowForma to create a digital solution, and then the job was to sell that solution to the people on the ground, of which there were very many. So there were lots of end users of this system. They had to go and sell it, and part of the success, it turned out to be a very successful solution. It actually won a national award because it was the first time it had been done successfully. And the reason it succeeded was that it was exactly what you're saying, Jonathan. Basically, they pushed out the first version of the system to the end users, and then they listened for feedback. And then they went and changed it, pushed it out again, listened for feedback, and went through several iterations, quite many iterations, to actually get the system accepted by everybody, so that there was no objectors left. Basically, they dealt with every little thing. And the thing about it is that, you know, some of these things were really tiny things. They were very minor points, and it was exactly what you just said, Jonathan, about, you know, you'll have somebody out there who simply wants to be heard and wants to be, they'll have a minor objection, but they want that objection noted and acted on, and you have to actually do that in order to get them to adopt it. But at the end of the day, they had massive adoption, really successful. They ended up with a full-blown dashboard solution that showed them in real time all the permits that were being issued over the entire highway, which was 32 kilometers, I don't know, about 26 miles long section of highway. So they were able to get a live dashboard of all the permits and where permits were being delayed. And of course, we all know if permits are delayed, work isn't done, etc. So it was really valuable at the end of the day. But a key to it all working out was getting it adopted, getting everybody on board, and dealing with all the little objections. And it took them a couple of weeks to build the system. It took about 3 months to actually get everybody on board. So never underestimate the challenge of that. You know, getting people to adopt solutions. It can take a while, but it's really worth the effort if you can put the effort in.
It's something that I found successful with when you're dealing with the objectors and the naysayers is sometimes instead of focusing on them, I'll focus on someone else on the project team, or maybe their buddy or maybe their friend. And then if you sell it on them, they will then sell it on the naysayer. I've had success with that in the past.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I love that tip, Sean.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, very good.
Whatever works, you know, whatever works.
Yeah.
I think we've all used that in practice once at least.
We have some questions here from the audience, but before we move on to maybe some of the questions, Paul, now might be a nice time. I know we're talking a lot about process automation, but maybe you could show us a little bit about and show everyone in person what a solution looks like. So I know we've got about 30 minutes left. So Paul, if you want to spend the next maybe 15 minutes or so, you can. I have a couple of slides here that you might like to talk through, and we can move through them quickly, and then I'd love for you to share your screen, and maybe you can show the audience some of our process accelerators and maybe some cool things. I don't know if process automation can be that cool. And then we'll jump into some of the questions from the audience. So keep firing your questions in. We've got a nice pool of them so far. So now is your chance to get them in, and we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end.
Sure. So I'll just give people a quick overview of FlowForma. I don't know, Ursula, if you want to put those slides up.
Yeah, can you see those there?
I can't at this moment.
Okay, hold on a second.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Perfect.
So just a little bit about FlowForma, the product. So FlowForma is an award-winning business process tool, and basically something that's quite unusual about our product is its user interface. It's a very easy to adopt, friendly user interface, and that's where we've won the awards. It's all to do with how quick and easy it is to configure and how quick and easy it is to actually be used and adopted by the workforce. So that's a really critical thing. And we see ourselves as kind of revolutionizing the space because we're focused on self-sufficiency. So the idea here is that you're self-sufficient and you can actually build out solutions yourself. And I'm going to show you that in a moment, and you can judge yourself as to whether you'd be comfortable doing that. So if we jump to the next slide there, Ursula. So why do construction companies, what do they look for in process automation tools, and specifically as well in FlowForma? Well, they want to empower their workforce to build out solutions. This is quite different. So we talked a little bit about coding and no coding earlier on, and we're very much in the no code camp. And the reason for that is because we want to empower people within your organization to build out solutions. And the reason is that you probably don't have an IT department who has the time and you don't have the money to employ an external vendor to build out a custom solution for you. So why not use your business people, your engineers, to actually build out solutions that meet your specific company needs? And that's what we're all about. The other thing is that, like I was talking about, our friendly user interface, so that helps with adoption, helps those naysayers and so on to actually, adopt and agree to use the solution, because if you don't use it, you don't get any benefit out of it. Also, we've got integration with Microsoft Teams, because everybody during the pandemic has switched to using tools like Teams and Zoom and so on to communicate with each other. So we built in a product that lets you associate all that activity on Teams with actual business processes that deliver business results. We've also built extensions to engage with, so you can, your suppliers and your subcontractors and so on can actually use the system, so that all that detail of their activity is being captured along with yours, and feeding back into a data lake so that you can use extensive reporting on that. The whole idea with it as well is that you're removing paper, because the system extends out to the mobile workforce, so you can use it on mobile devices, and then you don't need to have any paper anymore, which is critical, of course, during the pandemic. And those mobile devices can operate offline, which is really critical for construction. So when you're off on site and you don't have connectivity, you can still fill in the form and record data and then sync up later. Now, our business model is all about starting small. So you can start off with a small number of users of the system. Let's say you use it within a single project, and then you can move it on and use it within other projects within your entire organization, including the people in head office and all that kind of thing. And of course, it tracks everything that it's doing. So that leads to proven returns. You can actually see the impact that the system is having on your process execution and your efficiency. And that's really important, because we talked about earlier about internal selling and how you need to sell new digital technology to the wider audience within your company. And a key part of that is measuring how effective the solution is. So is it being adopted? And is it actually delivering returns in terms of, in our case, improving your processes and making them more efficient, right? So you can actually measure that, because the system captures all that data automatically. And we even have standard reports that show you, hey, this is how well you were doing last month. Now you're doing this well, now you're doing that well. So you can actually see over time a trend of improved efficiency. Really important in terms of internal selling, not just internal selling to the actual business users, the site workers out there filling in forms on mobile devices, but selling to the C-level who are ultimately backing the initiative in the first place, okay? So proven returns is just so critical. We covered it off a little bit earlier on, but just restate it again because it's just so important. Okay, Ursula, next slide. So what we've done is we've built out a series of what we call process accelerators. And these are just templates, pre-built templates that you can start using straight away. Because a lot of people say to us, well, hey, you know what, we love the fact that we can build out a solution in like a few days and everything, but we'd like you to just give us something to start off with. Well, that's what we've done. So based on our interaction with multiple construction companies across the world, we built out these standardized accelerators that you can just start using, and then you can modify them to your own needs and so on. I'm going to show you a little bit about that in a moment. So what we'll do now is we'll jump into the no-code demonstration. So here goes. This is what FlowForma looks like. So Ursula, if you could allow me to share my screen. Thank you very much. Okay, so FlowForma is a system that sits inside your Microsoft 365 environment, and specifically it sits inside a thing called SharePoint. You may be familiar with it. And within this environment, you can launch out new processes. These are some of the accelerators that we've created. So you can see here, like labor requisition, basically recruitment of contractors, and quality assurance check sheets, field change requests, what works permit. So some of you will be familiar with these processes already, because they're all taken from the existing construction client base based on solutions that have already been implemented. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick off one of these processes just to see what it looks like in FlowForma. So this is an end user view. This is what the end user sees when they're going into the system and they want to kick off, let's say, a field change request. I click on that button, and what opens up is an electronic form. And the electronic form has a bar across the top that shows you various steps in the process. So in order for me to complete a field change request, I have first of all have to raise it, then it has to be classified, then it goes for some approvals for the site engineer, and in this case the client, and then it goes from an answer. And on the very first step, I need to record some details. So I need to record a summary of the FCR, and then I can select a design document, upload a design document, and specify who's going to classify the FCR. Once I do that, the system will automatically assign the classify step to somebody else in the organization. So let's say I assign the classifying the FCR to my site manager. Then the site manager will receive an email, they go in and they apply the classification. And so different people in the organization carry out the different steps. And every time you're executing a step in a process, it's recorded in an audit trail so that you can see very quickly, excuse me, let me just check my battery there. You can see very quickly how the system is progressing, how the process is progressing. There we go. So this is what the end user sees on a desktop. They're seeing this series of steps, and they're capturing some data here that relates to the current step, raise FCR. But let's have a quick look at what this person would see if they were using a process on a mobile device. So I have a mobile device emulator here that's showing you a process running on, in this case, it's an Android a device emulator. And what it's doing is it's showing you, again, a very similar view. So this process is entirely different. It's for a general change request. And as you can see, these are the steps in the process, and these are the data items that are being captured. So there's lots of different data pieces here, but it's a different set of data. The whole idea here is that every process that you create in FlowForma, it looks kind of the same from an end user point of view, which means that it's instantly familiar. So whatever device you're using it on, whether it's you're on your desktop or you're on your mobile, whatever process you're executing, whether it's a hotworks permit or a field change request, the user is instantly familiar with it. They can quickly see what they're going to do and how it works. Now, in terms of monitoring all that information, as we're saying, all the information is captured, and you can automatically see things like work lists, and even record all the data from a reporting perspective as well, so that you can see reports like here. I have some reports on material requisitions. I can see how many material requisitions were being recorded and what value they were, and so on, so that I can quickly see stats of data in real time that are being captured through the execution of all these processes. Now, the processes themselves that we're looking at, the forms that we're looking at, they can be very different. Like this, for example, a safety observation report looks quite different to the one that we looked at previously, because it's designed to be run on a mobile device. So this is for safety observations that are carried out in the field. And what people want to record are things like the GPS location. They want to record the map where they currently are, for example, and record different types of information, like uploading a picture of the safety observation. So they'll be taking photographs on site using their mobile devices and uploading them into the form here. So what I'm showing here is that the processes can really be very different. So when people are thinking about processes, they often think of processes like, oh, let's say time recording or expense sheet management or whatever. But processes can be things like safety observations, where you're recording data on mobile devices in lots of different formats and so on. And then this safety observation is fed through to HSE in head office, for example, for further analysis. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're recording data of lots of different types, depending on the different type of process you might be executing. At the end of the day, conscious of time, all of these processes that you're using are configured using a configuration tool. So I'm going to open up one here just as an example, and let's pick that field change request that we were looking at earlier on. So what does the field change request look like in a configuration tool? This is what we're seeing. We're seeing all the steps in a process, so raise FCR, classify FCR, some approvals as well. And you can quickly add in new steps into this process very easily. And within each of these steps, you also have data items that you're capturing. So you can specify what pieces of data you want to capture, and you can see what the end user is going to see here on the right hand side. You can see a view of that, and as you modify these steps, you modify the data and so on, that's reflected automatically in the view that you're seeing. And then the system will automatically present that view on a desktop or on a mobile device. Again, all that data that you're executing in the process is automatically captured in the background, so you don't need to actually do anything else to make that happen automatically. And what this is all about is making the whole configuration process really easy. So if I want to add a step into this process, I click on plus step, we call this new step, and press save. It adds it into the end, and then I drag it up to the appropriate execution point. I want to add some data in here. Let's add a question. So changing this process is really easy. And all you've got to do is, did it happen? All you've got to do is quickly fill in some forms like this, and then the process is automatically changed. And as you can see, we now have a new step in the process. We have raise FCR, we have this new step, and this is what's going to be captured on the new step. And this ability to quickly be very agile and quickly change things and quickly construct things really helps with, one, the efficiency, because you can use a business user can configure this. There's no code involved. You just have to have an understanding of process. So one is efficiency, but the other thing is responding to change and carrying out those exercises like we talked about earlier, where you're trying to push out a draft of a process, get some feedback from those end users, the naysayers, and the guys who are very positive towards it as well, making the process more efficient, making the whole system more efficient, and getting it adopted and getting it used by the business. Now, there's a lot to FlowForma, a lot more than you're seeing here, but within a short 10-minute window, this is maybe as much as I can show you. But we do have all sorts of interesting things, like we have a dashboarding tool on this as well, so you can see a view of all the processes that are operating. Again, it's going back to that ability to capture data and carry out analytics on it, and get a view of everything that's going on in your organization. I think realistically, Ursula, that's probably as much as I can show in the time frame. So maybe we'll pop back to our presentation.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that, Paul. I know you're quite limited with time there. So we do offer like 30-minute demonstrations, sometimes a little bit longer if needs be. If people want to see a particular process, 9 out of 10 times we have an example or a similar solution to that that we can share. So always feel free to reach out and ask. We're more than happy to help. And I know one of the questions were people were looking for training and more information, and we can offer more information, more guidance as well on how to get started and about your organization in particular, and how we can help in that sense. So before we kick off into the last couple of minutes of a Q&A, just as a nice summary slide, I know we've talked about a lot, but some recommendations that we have for process automation success in 2021 and beyond. So the first thing is to assume that rapid process automation is the new normal. I think the pandemic has really highlighted that for us, and digital is definitely the way forward. So there's no point in trying to ignore it, shoving it under the rug and pretending it's going to go away. It's definitely here to stay. So overcome the demand for automation in 2021 by empowering your business people to digitize. And I know this has been touched on throughout the discussion, is, that's you're finding that champion, you're building the process yourself. If it's no code, it means you don't need to get IT involved. If you need their support, they're probably more happy to support you than take time out of their day to digitize a process that you need created for them. I'm sure they'll be happy to support you. And make 2021 the year you say goodbye to manual, visible paper and spreadsheet processes. I think that the sooner the better. The project can get kick-started. You'll always look back and think, why didn't I do that sooner? So I think that's a great thing to have in your mind, is this year I'm going to say goodbye and get rid. and drive better customer and supplier experiences by engaging in them in your processes. So Paul, I know we didn't get to go into much detail on this, but we've seen great success and, you know, great collaboration and communication between customers and suppliers and clients and things like that. So I think that's also a great way forward. And we also offer a trial of FlowForma process automation too. So that's a 14-day free trial where those templates that Paul mentioned earlier on are available for your access, and you can tweak them and see how they can fit your organization and get a feel for a process automation tool yourself. So they're just some quick roundups and some quick tips. I just want to thank you all for joining today, and I'll just pass it on to the event organisers to close it off.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Ursula, all of our panelists, Sean, Vikas, Jonathan and Paul, and our sponsor, FlowForma, and everyone who's joined us in the audience today.